All right, so let's have some questions.
We'll give Richard a hand. Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
Before we begin, I do want to thank my CEO of Alphanumeric for coming, Randy Trice. I do have a day job, and he's my boss.
He even took his tie off.
Yeah,
That's great.
well, we don't wear ties in the tech industry, but maybe but Randy's has sort of transformed our company to get into AI and different things like that. But thank you for coming, and thank the Alphanumeric family for letting me serve the public. Before we begin the Q&A, I'd like everyone to just introduce yourselves a little bit about your interest in technology. I think it would be helpful for us as we have the Q&A.
Sure. Well, so how many people are in government here? Just you. Okay. Well, you got to carry the whole message forward to all of government on your own. That's a big burden to bear.
Yeah, and also it's Chicken Tikka Masala Day. It's International Chicken Tikka Masala Day, so I've got really good dinner for us. So everyone's got to eat really good, because I don't want, unless I take it back to the fire department, I can't go back home with 3 plates of food. There won't be any place in my fridge, so please, that'll be after me.
I know we have real estate and whatever.
Yeah, real estate. So if we could start here, everyone just say your name and where you work.
I'm Heidi Warner. I'm a registered nurse, and I've spent 20 years in the pharmaceutical industry monitoring clinical trials. I had a friend that had Da Vinci surgery by a robot.
Yeah. I've gowned up and watched those.
I saw your picture. That was nice. And she did very well. Good. Her husband's also a physician, and he was in the next room, but it worked out fine. But that had my thinking about that when I saw that picture.
Healthcare is a ripe area for, wringing human error out of the system. Let's put it that way.
And our former FDA commissioner, Dr. Rob Califf from Duke, is now at Alphabet because he said the same thing. He said that the pharmaceutical industry was lagging behind all of this. So.
Yep, I think there's tremendous opportunity there, and we can go pretty deep on that as well.
Hi, my name is Keith Maddox. I have my own company, which I launched in September, Clinical Security. And so prior to that, I worked at HP. I put their HIPAA program in place after Omnibus, and then I was at Citrix, working with Jesse Lipson, ShareFile, and implementing up the HIPAA and the GDPR guy, I guess, at Citrix. And one of the products that I resell is called Darktrace, and it uses artificial intelligence, actually, and it's blowing everybody out.
That's
out the doors. Yeah.
Wow. Fantastic.
Yeah, Mike Soleim. I'm Chief Technology Officer at American Data, ADTI, right here in Morrisville. I started the company now.
Oh, great.
Founders.
All right. Thanks for starting your company in North Carolina. That's great.
Thank you. Yeah. So.
Ian Henshaw, Technology Tank. We're a think tank in kind of the intersection of the data economy and building entrepreneurial communities.
I'm a research scientist working in pharmaceutical industry for 15 years, discovering drugs for like cancer, such. Looked like the topic was little. So the pharma also moving into this AI and all those things like predictive drug designs. That's a good talk to attend.
That's great. And of course, IBM Watson just sort of kind of stubbed their toe in that field of drug discovery. It's taken a step back. Yeah, but it's a complex field. Like healthcare is very complex, but the best way to sort of solve those issues is through exponential growth of technology, and then we just need better human supervised training sets that are contextually bound that can solve those problems. I think going drug by drug is the right way instead of saying, here's a general tool you can use for everything.
Yeah, we want to bring down the 10-year timeline to a few years. It takes 10 years.
Yeah, that's a good goal. That's a great goal, and would have big implications for everybody.
Yeah.
Jamie Miller's background is hardware, software, product portfolio management. I work for a lot of technology companies here as well as in California. Currently, I am focusing on helping small companies improve their bottom line through visibility, visual appearances, and stuff on the network.
Oh, great. Outstanding.
Okay, Randy Trice with Alphanumeric. We work with probably the predominant vertical we work in is pharmaceutical. And so we work with them in all the way from clinical trials all the way through when it goes live, and I'm going to die here in a minute, so I won't be around. But that's primarily a services company.
Same.
Dave Rogers, I'm with Amazon, operations nation leader right now.
Oh, yeah.
Visiting Triangle. A lot of exciting work right now, machine learning and AI here being done, and just looking to see what's being done here.
All right, thanks for coming out, Dave.
Well, I'm Simi, and for my day job, I'm a private client advisor with the Private Bank of America. So we should talk if they haven't reached out to you yet.
We're working with just about every financial company in this area, except Bank of, well, we do have, we're in discussions there, so we should
Yeah,
talk.
so Bank of America is, we have most of our credit operations in Charlotte.
Right,
Which includes all of it, the business banking and then the commercial, as well as anywhere individual, consumer, and the private bank of it. So the whole hub is in Charlotte.
fantastic.
And for my volunteer job, I serve as the current president of TIE Carolinas. TIE is an organization Steve mentioned that you're familiar with.
Yes,
So it was started in 1980 in Silicon Valley with a bunch of billionaires who, smart people made money on technology, and they decided that it was time to support the younger entrepreneurs and network them and mentor with them and provide some funding. So that's the purpose and mission of TIE.
I'll see.
In the Carolinas, we have a chapter here, and I do exactly what you said, surround myself with smart people and let them connect with each other and do wonderful things. But one thing that you mentioned was missing was the funding part of it. We do have an angel investing arm, which is funneled by the Carolinas in Silicon Valley. And it is spread all over 18 countries with 62 chapters. We also have a specific Southeast arm, which involves TIE Atlanta, TIE Tampa, TIE Miami. So we have that resource available for the younger entrepreneurs. Plus, we pair them with established entrepreneurs for mentoring purposes, and we actually have a formal program where we monitor to make sure they're getting it. And as for the next generation, we run a youth entrepreneurship program for high school students.
Oh, great.
We give them a brief preview of what it would be if you started from ideation phase all the way to selling your technology. How would you go about asking for funding?
That's great. I didn't
And I
realize
think
it was
one of it-
that comprehensive. That's great.
Yeah, your daughter was a part of the program, right? Last year or this year? This year, yeah. So the winning team is going to MIT in Boston to compete in the global competition level in June. We'll
Fantastic.
see how that goes.
Yeah, we'll have to try to look in on Joey while they're there.
Yes.
Perfect.
Yeah, my name is MS Reddy. I have a startup firm. It's been 1.5 years. I'm going through a lot of up and down, uphill and downhill, and I know it's part of the entrepreneur. That's what the challenge I took it when I resigned from the Lenovo as a cloud architect. And having that startup firm, we've been serving in the 3 areas: vertically with pharmaceutical, which has a prominent business here in the North Carolina because in the state we are here, and also we are covering in the healthcare, where the EHR as well as all the more data analytical infrastructure related managing services. And the third sector is the retail, in that retail area, more focusing on the artificial intelligence, how we integrate with the cloud-based technology. When the moment I saw AWS, so that's where one of the prime core competency in the managed cloud services. We are now, we have a small set of team. We are serving in the 3 cloud prominent environments to provide the cloud managed infrastructure: AWS, Google Cloud, and Red Hat OpenShift. So,
And that's a big issue for anytime you roll out this kind of tech. I always tell people that if you didn't already recognize that, machine learning is intimate and it's powerful. So you really need, if I was procuring it, especially at a financial institution or elsewhere, you want it inside your firewall, under your control, ideally at the source code level, right? In fact, we have some financial institutions who put it on a separate machine that's air-gapped from their own network because they're so worried about the kinds of data that's on it. And so that's part of our business model. But sometimes setting it up even on an internal servers, that's a big part of the work that we had not really planned on when we first started. Because we always tell people, it's like, do it this way. You know, we've got it all set up on AWS and DigitalOcean and Cloud 66, and we've got this self-healing, resilient system. And they're like, that's awesome, but for us, it needs to be this way. You know, on Linux, we don't do Ubuntu. You know, they have all these rules about what can and can't be done. So it might be an interesting conversation for us to have.
Sure, yes, that's
Yeah.
good. We're happy to see.
My name is Allison Rouse. I'm the former Director of Sales and Marketing at Springmore Life Care Retirement Community. So I am a huge advocate for seniors and improving their life as they age. Now I'm a real estate agent with Keller Williams Preferred Realty, and as Richard was sitting here talking about AI, I drew an umbrella of how many programs I need to go to whittle down to one number that I need, you know, to potentially price a home. I find that there's so much information that goes in to that. It's not an exact science.
Yeah, it's a data fusion thing, yeah.
Correct. And so when you're reading different descriptions about homes and you're trying to price it just right, this one might have wainscoting, this one might not, this might. So anyway, I have 5 different things that I need to go to under that umbrella to just try to get a really good number. And so when I look at the information for real estate and pricing homes or selling homes, I'm also looking at all the developments that are sprouting up outside of Raleigh and how are they impacting the current developments that are within Raleigh and some of the businesses. I'd love to see somebody just kind of bring all that together in one program, not to mention the hundreds of laws and rules, policies that real estate agents have to follow.
Right, yep.
It's contracts, hundreds of them. And you have to go to so many different places to find and do one. It's very time consuming.
Yeah, I'm always amazed by that. Like there are certain industries that have successfully resisted a lot of the tech. And I would say education, healthcare. I mean, healthcare has a lot of tech in it, but some of the fact that we don't have like sort of standardized way, like there's 7,000 hospitals in the U.S. and there's like 7,000 different ways to do different things, and that's somehow okay.
And transferring records, like Joe Biden's initiative with his son, they couldn't.
Yeah, well, like real estate. So my dad died a couple of years ago, and I'm still 2 years later. I'm trying to sell a piece of property outside of Austin, Texas, and just getting them to, because they have this arcane weird probate system there, and they won't recognize my North Carolina thing. So there's like lawyers and stuff involved in this whole weird arcane process. I can't believe it's not just a button.
Right.
Like, you know, it's amazing to me that's there's a lot of stuff that's still like that, and maybe for good reason, but in this case, I would say adamantly no, it's not for a good reason.
Well,
Except making
it impacts
lawyers
businesses as well. I mean, it impacts, I think all the data that is here in all of these programs could help businesses determine what's a good place for them to build a building, to grow, to what type of population lives here, who does what, you know.
Yeah, I mean,
I
again, if you
it's
could,
a lot of.
and that's an opportunity for specialized AI, because again, I'll map this back to like the defense industry, where there's a lot of compliance rules and things like that, and every branch of the service has, like the Navy has all their compliance rules, the Air Force, whatever. And every time you try to do something new, you have to bring in these arcane priesthood of analysts who can supposedly understand the 18,000, policy rules around this thing. But like I said, when you finally connect that up to a machine learning system, first thing it does is say, you don't have what you think you had. And you've got a data entry, data organization, data preservation problem. We're finding that everywhere we go. And by the way, here's a whole bunch of rules that you have. Here's all the ones that are redundant. Here are the ones that contradict each other, because it's just too much for poor dumb humans to parse, even with the experts. And so we see that's why we ended up announcing a partnership 3 weeks ago with NCI, which is a sort of mid-tier defense firm, about $300 million company, 2,500 people, just to deal with all the great opportunity there is inside of government, simply because there's a lot of stuff that's susceptible to machine learning and AI in that field, and we're going to get a lot of advances there fast.
You're like Tanjo, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm
there's-
Jarvis. I work at Tanjo, so
Okay.
yeah.
Well,
Style runner.
before we get into questions, I'll just make a quick comment, and then we can grab dinner, and we have everyone until 6, maybe 20 minutes of
It
questions.
looks like they turned the AC off at 5 too.
Yeah.
A
A little bit of networking, so everyone can network, and so, all I'll say is that, a couple things, is that the reason that I, first of all, the good news that I have to share with Morrisville is I'm really, in my third term, really working to make Morrisville one of the most technologically advanced cities in the region and the state. And we have a lot to do, but we have a CIO now we've hired, Rick Ralph. And already just in the span of a few weeks, we're making all kinds of strides. In our new budget, we're looking now at analytics dashboards that would actually be able to track in real time traffic counts. It took me a few years to get this position approved, but we finally got it. Sensors in our buildings, basically making Morrisville a smart city, following the work of Carrie, but doing it in a way, we have such an abundance of technology leaders in Morrisville, many tech companies, we've got Wake Tech as a resource. So I think it's going to be very exciting in terms of, and the reason I wanted to start this tech series is, and we're going to start in Morrisville, but we're going to do them around the county, we're going to do them around the state to bring to the conversation for policymakers of how technology is having an impact on our services that we deliver. How can we, as elected officials, make better decisions? What are the new jobs? This is a big concern Tom Looney has, is the jobs that are going to happen in the next few years. We don't have the skill sets to provide those jobs. So what is going to happen in an era when IBM and Google and Facebook aren't requiring us to have 4-year degrees anymore? Am I going to go to a Wake Tech? Am I going to get a job? We've heard stories of people going to Wake Tech and getting jobs, right?
They intern and they get hired.
Putting veterans back to work that are coming back, great opportunity. Arun Singh, who couldn't be here today, he's organizing a golf tournament to raise. Last year they raised $400,000 for the wounded warriors, which is, and that's at Prestonwood, I think, on June 3rd. It's a great cause, but there's organizations like North Carolina for Military Education, and how do we tie them into technology so that veterans coming back from Afghanistan or from Iraq or wherever they are in the world can come back and transition back and get a good paying job. So Secretary Larry Hall and I are working on sort of this. So I could go on and on, but the bottom line is this. I mean, if you're an entrepreneur and you have an idea, or you're a technologist and you have an idea, please email me, come see me at City Hall, give me your idea, and now it's a lot easier. I can introduce you to Rick Ralph, and he can decide where this fits into our strategic plan. The Morrisville now has a strategic plan, so transportation mobility, congestion, traffic. We want your ideas on apps and technologies that can help move the traffic flow. Economic development is one of our goals. Inclusive neighborhoods, public safety. Those are our top goals. So I think to the extent that we can leverage technologists and entrepreneurs to kind of help us solve problems, I think it's a great thing, rather than living in a silo in City Hall or wherever where you're making decisions almost with a blind spot, right? So that's really my closing argument to you guys, is that's why I really appreciate you coming. I have a newsletter. You can go to steverao.com, get my newsletter, and it's an informational, not a political newsletter, just basically gives you basic information on what we're doing in Morrisville, work I'm doing in the tech industry. So, leave it at that.
That's great. Yeah, and I really continue to like the idea of implementing all this stuff here in North Carolina first. So again, the 58 community college thing with one machine learning brain that kind of harmonizes all that. That's an example that we'll be able to take to other states. Want to do that here, both in Charlotte and whoever raises their hand here in the Triangle as well, to implement these technologies we're talking about.
Yeah, and I think that's the final thing I'll say before we open up questions is that's a big concern I have, is that we have the Department of Technology in North Carolina, which is more focused on buying the infrastructure and managing the state, although Secretary Boyette's starting to make some changes with bringing in AI technology when you're calling in the DMV, that you're not on the phone all the time, the machine learning and the data, so the low-hanging fruit from an agency perspective. But we have so many cities in North Carolina, even in Wake County, 13 cities, but the only time there's a technology event, it's either in Raleigh or Cary, and now Morrisville. But we should be able to scale these kind of things so that other cities know. And I've even told Governor Cooper this is going to be a big dilemma for the state, is when the state reaches a point where all these jobs that are in demand we don't have the skills for, cities won't be able to compete if they don't know how to have sensors, they don't have smart technology. And if he does get reelected and after a second term, it's going to be very hard for whoever comes in. So the change, I think, is going to happen at the city level and the local communities. So, I think this is something that you and I can work on. So,
You bet.
do you guys want to grab dinner and ask questions? Or you want to ask questions and then grab dinner? It's your choice.
Ask questions.
Questions,
Okay,
right.
thank you for coming, and thank you again. And
Yeah.
just questions, just basic questions. You're giving me some ideas of writing a sci-fi novel, I tell you, it's just the wheels are really spinning. Might write a bestseller tonight.
So, yeah, Richard, how much of a challenge is there in the legal community from like using machine learning to do things like analyze contracts? I can just imagine there's a lot of pushback.
Oh, yeah, I mean, the resistance is not futile. they are resisting.
Yeah.
But again, there are, we're seeing some breakthroughs there pretty quickly. And again, for a lot of routine things like, again, every time I look at all the routine tests, like every time in business I have a non-disclosure agreement, why do I need to go to my attorney to have him create a new one? Or even like things like standard real estate contracts, anything that can be standardized like that. We ought to be able to use a machine system to create those. But not only that, it's sort of again, I think it's better to think in terms of like what we did for the accounting firms. So in 2017, there were these new rules coming out around revenue recognition. And I was speaking at a conference called Audit U down in Atlanta. And there were, 1,000-some people in the audience. And they were all like trying to figure out like, how do we prepare ourselves for these new revenue recognition and there was some lease recognition rules that were coming out by FASB. And I just said, oh man, that's a perfect opportunity because, understanding the rules, that's old AI. I can create a little system that understands the logic behind those new rules, but now I need to apply it to all the future situations. So I need to train a system, and that's what we did here for Cherry Beckert, a local firm, mid-size, accounting firm, is built a system. We had to train it on just sales agreements. So people selling software or physical goods or whatever. And it's like if you're if you're an accountant, you have to go in and read all these transactions and then make a judgment about are they following the right revenue recognition rules or lease recognition rules. Well, instead of the human accountant having to do that, we have a system that's trained on it. And this was funny. Like the first day we sat down, they said, here's about 300 agreements to get you started. We don't want to overwhelm you. And we were just, my data scientist was sitting there frowning, and we were just like, yeah, were you not listening to us? Like, do you have 10 million? Like now? Like we need 10 million agreements like right now to feed into the system. I can't do anything with 200. That's insufficient. So we ended up having to go out and find a training set that had about 4 million sales agreements. And it was everything from a scanned-in purchase order that someone had handwritten to a 100-page agreement that's got all the warranties and disclaimers and milestone payment terms and all that stuff. And once it's read through all that stuff now, and again, we're not replacing the accountant, but now one accountant can do the work of 10 accountants. Yeah. So they can just have the system read it all and do what, the original purpose of computers beyond just calculating was this idea of just bin sorting, right? Of give me an input and let me just put it in the bins and classify it for you. Machine learning is extraordinarily good at that, especially if you don't try to train it on like all human knowledge and have it be like Watson playing Jeopardy or something. You train it on just like, the only thing this system cares about is sales agreements and the terms and words and things in it and millions of examples of that. And it gets really, really good at it and becomes this 10x multiplier. And it's something we did in, 3 months.
Well,
very simple.
Where I see a particular application is in compliance in particular, which I've been involved in years, right? There's so many different state laws, so much overlap, as you mentioned, right? You really need to use something like this in order to say, okay, how can I take the most efficient risk-based approach to applying these rules, right? Because most people don't understand half of them, they apply them incorrectly. And this is where I see there's a great application.
Yeah, and I think the opportunity there is a purpose-built system that's trained on a massive set of examples and what the human judgment was on those examples previously, if you can get that. It's just
case law.
Yeah, just a big set of, it's basically a big lookup table that you train it on. And again, you don't take the human out of it, but now the human can just, instead of having to go, God, I got to go read all these compliance rules, and instead it just, this system reads it all, and then maybe like the way you saw what Watson play Jeopardy, it says, I'm 68% sure you should do this, 52% this, 28% this, But in the end, the human being has to go like, I'm choosing that one, right? But it just accelerates the human's output. And that's why the articles, if you've seen me writing, I'm writing a book on this title, with this title, Superhuman. And again, it's what Hans Moravec says, it's ourselves in more potent form. The way a human who's adept at search is arguably more intelligent than people who aren't, right? They're in an advantage. So in this new age we're already in, if you have the ability to like read all the contracts and then do 8 hours of work in 30 minutes, do you have an advantage over people who are doing it the old way? Absolutely.
Well, at HP, we spent about a year deciding if somebody was a business associate or not. We still didn't know, right? And it's probably something that you can figure out in a relatively short amount of time based on, you know, current like case law and things like that.
You just, again, it's all about making sure you've got a purpose-built system that's narrowly focused on that. So the word that we actually use behind that, and if you guys are fans of the Gartner hype cycle curve, if you follow their hype cycle, what's interesting, and I do a talk on that as well, machine learning has been stuck at the top of the hype curve for the last 4 years, and it hasn't moved. But they have this new thing that's gone down the slope and is up the slope of enlightenment already, and they call it ensemble learning. Well, that's basically what we do, which is a bunch of narrowly, remember when you saw the two systems talking to each other? They each have narrowly defined tasks, which they've become extraordinarily expert at. And that's, having those things work together is with humans, is I think the recipe for dramatic success. And that's how I would tackle that problem you described.
So Richard, there's a book, I don't get to read a lot, but once in a while, by Dan Brown. I don't know if anybody else is a Dan Brown fan.
Yes.
And Dan, it's called Origins. I think it came out in 2017.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's an S or not, but anyways, the very first chapter, I can find it very interesting. So they go into a museum, and they're all handed a set of, earphones, and Robert Langdon says, I don't need it. I'm a expert. I know everything. All the art that is displayed. Said, no, this is built specifically for you, so you need to. So he goes and puts it on, and then the voice starts talking to him, and he goes, well, where are you? And the voice says, well, I know that you're currently in Spain, but I am somewhere in the U.S. And the whole way, all through the museum, the voice talks to him, and whenever Robert says something, the voice responds. He goes, well, I'm kind of feeling hot today. Yeah, it's 80 degrees outside, or something like that. And it's a lot of back and forth. And of it, Robert is convinced that it is a person. And then at the end, he goes, okay, well, where are you? Well, he goes, I was created just for you, because we studied your behavior. And he said there are 300 people participating in the museum today who are walking around, and each one had a particular headset which was personalized to them.
Isn't that cool? And again, that's within you saw the pieces of that in what I just described, right? Personalized.
Very fascinating.
There's another book, if you haven't read it, came out in the 90s actually. It was called Diamond Age by Neil Stephenson, and it talks about this thing, the Young Ladies Illustrated Primer, which I still think is the model for education, which is a system that imprints on you and guides you through your learning journey for your entire life. That's one of the things we want to build for not just Wake Tech, but all community college students, eventually high school, and as far back as we can get while we're managing the FERPA regulations and HIPAA type things, right? But the idea, we call it GoBot, but it's this idea of like, if you announce in junior high school, I want to become a nurse, or I want to be a lawyer, hopefully not, but there's no lawyers here. Used to be, or whatever your goal is, right? And the system would actually help guide you along that. And one of the things that it recognizes is that, first of all, it's that personalized learning journey, but also your education is not just the formal classes you attend. 65 or 70%, depending on who you talk to, of education is all informal. It's the people you hang out with, the things you're pulling off the net, what are you reading, what are you choosing to do with your attention when it comes to learning. And having a system that guides you on that path, that tells you things like, today you should go have a coffee with Steve Rao, or you should go go visit this group, or read this thing, or watch this YouTube video, or whatever. And you have a whole bunch. Think about this little army of minions whose sole goal is to make you better. And there doesn't need to be just one. There could be, again, this ensemble concept of a whole bunch of specialized bots in each field that feeds up to one greater bot that's then communicating with the person. And when I sit down at dinner with my family, I have 2 kids, they know what they already have their answers every day. I'm like, what have you done for mind, body, and spirit today? And tell me, and they're like, today, Daddy, I did, I shot 50 hoops, and I played soccer, and I did this, that's my body. For my mind, I read this, and I pushed myself in this area, and we actually, because I'm into gamification, I have little points that they get for each thing. In spirit, here's the people I helped, and I helped Mommy do this, and whatever. But I want to see that every single day. But think about that on a grander scale where you've got a system. It's just, its goal is, like, how do I make you a better person?
So one of the youth entrepreneurs team this year, for this year's competition, they came up with something similar. They said high school students have a lot of mental issues, and going to the nurse at school is tabooish. You don't want your friends to know you have a problem. So they said, well, why don't we build an app on our phones, because everybody's looking at their phones every time, and then the nurse would feed them information through that based on what they're searching, what they're typing, and the parents would have oversight on it. And they could be getting treatment, but nobody else knowing that they are getting the treatment.
And I think that's also a very rich area for this kind of technology. And again, you really hope that in that field there's a high human touch possibility there. But the problem with it is, again, we already know, like at Wake Tech, that one of the key things behind student success is getting the help that you need. So we have these counselors. But we have something like a dozen counselors, and we have 70,000 students. So how do you extend the reach of effective counselors to more people instead of leaving them alone as standalone? Because what I keep saying is being a standalone human being is insufficient now.
And that has to be done very, very carefully, because we had this case in California or somewhere where the family was told their father was dying by a robot, and it was done in a very that's hard. way. So I could see it working in that situation, but not in this one.
Yeah, I mean, you have to understand where the human touch is needed and where you can provide other kinds of assistance.
So these students just focus on their generation, mostly high school, and they look for problems which are prevalent in high school or middle school right now. Like one of them was vaping.
Yes.
I'm sorry, this is my wet. My dog is in the research.
Okay.
Let me take
All right. That's your bot calling you. Your vet bot. All right. Yeah.
So as you apply like these new capabilities growing not just exponentially or geometrically, but paradigm altering how people make decisions or what, we're now going to apply this to something that maybe manipulates behaviors as well as just opinions. We argue opinion is behavior. How much is Tanjo or the industry investing in understanding the ethics, not just ethically, like what applications do I choose to do, but now that I'm supporting this type of application, what are my obligations to audit my model, to make sure the data hasn't become corrupted within different areas?
Yeah, so I think the best place I've seen, again, the 2 guys I mentioned there, Reid Hoffman and Joichi Ito, have a combined program based out of MIT where they are studying the ethics of AI and the traceability, transparency, trying to make sure they wring bias out of, because again, if you train a system on data that's biased, you're going to get a biased output. And you've probably, guys, have all seen, like, if early on Watson trained a system on, they included like the Urban Dictionary in its training, and it started cussing in its responses. Or there's another one that Google did where they were training, or some academic institution with Google stuff was training it on not Quora, but Reddit or something. And it became very racist, xenophobic, just horrible very quickly, and they had to take it out back and shoot it. So that's important, and that's why I just sort of trim it all down to say, for anybody who's buying this kind of tech, I'm like, look, you must understand it's not just like buying a server or any kind. This is potent stuff. It's very intimate. In order for it to work well, it needs to come in and connect to all of your information, your personnel, when it works well, it has access to everything. And that's why you need it under your control, source code level. And that was the breakthrough for us. And I had a hard board meeting where I explained, it's like, yeah, we're going to give our source code to our customers. And they're like, wait a second, you know, you're giving away the whole baby. We spent X millions of dollars building that. And I'm like, it's the right thing to do. It's the only way to do it. And it's like, and again, I talked to Bob from Red Hat, you know, and I said, well, it is possible to build a pretty thriving big business on open source software. It means there's a lot of services and other things that go with it. And of course, what we've learned is in order for it to work well, it has to be trained properly. And that's one of the specific skills we've invested in, is how to do that properly. But absolutely, I would never use this stuff without full traceability. After the announcement came out about what we're doing in North Carolina, we talked to another very, very large state. It's like, we want to hear about it too, but you know, we're already doing machine learning. We've got Google, Microsoft, everybody in here, and they're all but they're giving it to us for free. And I'm like, really? Why are they doing that? Oh yeah, we give them the data, and then they go, and I'm like, whoa, stop right there. What data are you giving them? It's like, well, you know, everything they need, but it's free. It's like, is it? And does the population, I won't say the state, does the population of your state know that you've given all this data, all this private information to these corporations? And you don't know where, you lobbed it over the firewall, you don't know where, but it's coming back to you and it's becoming useful, right? And that's great, but where'd your data go? Who's keeping it? Like, oh, they said that we signed an agreement that they would keep it safe. I'm like, holy shit, you know?
Is that similar to Facebook?
Yeah. I mean,
Are you familiar with the book Life After Google by George Gilman?
Yeah. Yeah, I've talked to George a couple of times.
I had lunch with him 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, I have. I used to give away his telecosm books until I guess some of the premises now broke down. So he said that but you know, all of us, everybody except like the analysts who make bad predictions, that they never seem to, like Gartner will have those things. I shouldn't talk about Gartner. I like Gartner. But no, analysts will make predictions and they don't come true, and no one ever like falls under the axe for that. But George had a lot of predictions that didn't come true. Smart guy.
He had a lot that did come true.
That's true, yeah. It's like you know, talking to Alan Kay's my hero about Xerox PARC. It's like, yeah, they invented PostScript. It's $1 billion business, right? But they totally forgot. They invented the internet and desktop computing too, but missed that completely. But are they unsuccessful? No, they did some cool stuff.
So I have one question.
Yes, sir.
So for the education related, what are the areas, what are the applications we can, what are you guys focusing so that we can help better to the next generation?
In education specifically, yeah. So again, I think this whole idea of getting personalized learning paths and information to students as they need it is a wonderful area. And I think I've written several articles on the Getting Smart website. It's in the Getting Smart book and a couple of others which I can direct you to. But it's really about how do we make teachers superhuman, and their role I think needs to change. But it's about guiding students on these learning paths, and then and using technology to do that. But I'm on the board of trustees here on my second term. Originally appointed by a Democratic governor and reappointed by a Republican governor, so I can be diplomatic. And I was on the board of, so James Cameron, the director, started a school as an experiment. And I'm always attracted to, again, smart people, especially billionaire smart people, who are taking out a clean piece of paper and trying to create something. So he and his wife created a school in Calabasas, California called the Miu School. And basically they just said, look, we're going to create a whole new way. Like they started with, and I remember talking to Jim, I was on the set of Avatar with him and talking about this, and he was like, what kind of people do we need to make? And I love those kinds of questions. It's like, what does that mean? It's like, what kind of people will we need in 2020? How do we make them? Let's start a school and make those kinds of people. And I'm like, oh, I'm in. You know, so I joined the board of that school, and we ended up looking at a lot of different models and settled on the Reggio Emilio, model, not Montessori, Reggio Emilio, and then project-based learning. And all, but we decided no tech, because we brought in experts from all over. Like Sir Ken Robinson is still on the board. I left 2 years ago, but because the commute was kind of hard. But Sir Ken Robinson is there, a bunch of other smart people, and they're like, no tech before 4th grade. But after that, they've got to become fluent with these tools that are changing the world. But before that, we don't want them distracted by screens and stuff. We need them out doing project-based, synthesized kinds of learning that follows what they're passionate about. and is contextual and all this great stuff. And we're just starting to graduate out of high school, the first of those kids, and they're some pretty extraordinary kids.
So in the school, in the education itself, because in the education institution level itself, there is a psychology-based related applications also need to be more in demand. So in that space, if the AI can extend or leverage the contribution so that kids can be more aligned to the better career or better behavior.
Yeah, it does start with understanding who somebody is, putting them on a path. Now, one of the I'll tell you another quick little story, if you guys are all right with it. I'll tell it as fast as I can. But at Lockheed, I was part of a really interesting project there with the UK Ministry of Defense. So we got a contract to train all of the aircrew members for the UK. That means fighter pilots, helicopter pilots, C-130 pilots, or aircrew members who are managing or manning, radios, communication equipment, radar, whatever, on these things. And so we get raw recruits, and we don't get paid until we produced a qualified candidate. And it's amazing what happens with that kind of alignment. I wish we had that in education here and in healthcare and everywhere else, because when it's aligned, like we were showing up as Lockheed, and we weren't saying, how many of my fine Lockheed Martin simulators can I sell you? We were going, for each task, who has the best simulator? Oh, Boeing does? Well, let's buy Boeing's and put it in here. Because we had to buy airplanes, rent facilities or build facilities, hire teachers, and for each one of the kinds of tasks, figure out how much time should be spent in a classroom, how much time with interactive multimedia instruction, how much time in a simulator, how much time in a real aircraft yields the shortest path to mastery. And we got a medal from the Queen of England, Lockheed did, not me, for compressing that time. Now, we can't say, in some cases it was by a third, in some cases more. And Lockheed considers parts of that a trade secret because they have this big program called Military Flying Training Systems, where they do it all over the world. They can't do it in the U.S., though, because in the U.S. we don't allow multi-year contracts. And the only way you can do a contract like we did with the UK is you have to have a 10-year at least contract so you can invest in buildings and buying planes and all that stuff. If you lose your funding after 1 year, well, you're in the red up to your gills. But it also meant like being more selective about people up front, like what kinds of people become fighter pilots? What are the indicators that someone's going to become successful? Or which people do we need to direct in which other directions?
Similarly, politicians, good politicians.
Yeah, I mean, it was an interesting thing, but again, I told Nolan Bushnell about that, as you saw me in a picture with him. He's like, Richard, we can do high school in half the time now. And he started talking to people about, we're going to do high school in 1 year instead of 4. And I was like, no, that's not what I meant, right? But we can do things like I can train algebra faster. I can do this, all these different things I can do faster. And then what do you do with that extra time?
Richard, are you, my son is on the autism scale, high functioning, and school's always been a disaster for him, right? Especially in college in particular, right? So he was at ECU, and he's at Wake Tech right now. But he's super smart, but he gets hung up on things like spending 3 days on the subject, figuring out what it's going to be, right? And
self-paced is the only way to go,
yeah, so I wondered if you have, anything...
that's true. So in that case, and we have people even that we work with that are on different levels of that. But so yeah, I think there is even though the research that we did in that program I just described told me that there isn't really such a thing as personalized learning styles, but there are preferences for certain kinds of media, and there's a time cadence that's specific to individuals for certain kinds of tasks. And getting that narrowed down to it and have a system that lets someone do that asynchronously and that's the problem with most classrooms today is everybody teaches to this lowest common denominator and at this one pace. And what we found is if you let people race ahead, those who can, and then the teacher gets to spend more time with those who are having difficulty at whatever modality they're in. And you get, and we did this, we had this validated many times with the stuff we built, that you get, we'd go from a 50% pass rate for something to 100%, and do it in a compressed amount of time in every case. And we did this in McDonald's, I did it for BP gas stations, I did it for all kinds of stuff. So I think we do have solutions for that. Getting it past the policy part in education still remains difficult. And again, it's not one answer. It's not you didn't hear me say, Richard said, put tech in and it fixes everything. No, it's this sort of bespoke, customized understanding of like every individual in the class and which trajectory they're on and how to tailor stuff to them. And that's just something that, a classroom of 50 kids or something is not set up to do.
Our teachers are not taught to teach that way. It's like you said, it's a common denominator. I have a son who's learning challenged. It's going to take him 5 years to go through college. He's ADHD, short-term memory auditory processing issues. And so when he was going through school, he was obviously being taught as if he was the common denominator. And there, I don't know if you've ever heard of All Kinds of Minds Institute over in Chapel Hill. I don't want to get off topic, but it's hard to get into the institute, but they determine how a child learns. So if teachers could have some type of artificial intelligence that could help them, with the information you've put in from the child.
I think there's tremendous opportunity there to change the role of the teacher to a guide as opposed to a lecturer.
Right.
And then do that. Yeah, so.
Well, let's break and network a little bit before we have to get out of here. And
Tikka masala's getting cold.
Yeah, and they made too much food, but I'm gonna take it to the fire department. But thank you so much for coming. The next one, I'm trying to get Secretary Boyette, who runs our Department of Technology, to come in June. So, and then we've got a number of different tech leaders that are going to be coming in this series. So thank you so much, Richard, for being here.
I appreciate it. Enjoyed it. Thanks, guys.